Hello everyone. In this episode we're going to talk about switch statements and then go into if statements a little bit since they sort of relate. But we're going to build off of the idea of the last episode of variables, and now we can see what we can do with these variables and how the most essential basic part or element of Java kind of builds up to these bigger, more complicated pieces of code. So first we can see that we have our public class lessons and our main function. And then the first thing inside this main function is this string called letter grade, and we set it equal to the character C. So, by what we learned about variables, we know letter grade and C are the same things. And now we can see our switch statement. And if you're overwhelmed by this code, don't be. It's really not that difficult once you kind of start dissecting it. We can see that we indicate this as a switch statement here by putting switch. And then we have our value that we're checking, which is letter grade that we declared above. And we know that's equal to C. So all this is checking this value, this letter grade value, against each of these cases and finding one that matches. So case A, we know that C and A are not the same thing. And of course, the letter grade is equal to C. So letter grade and A are not the same thing. Letter grade and B are not the same thing, but letter grade and C are the same things because letter grade is equal to C up here, which we declared. So the correct case that it would go into is case C. Here it would print out student received a C, and then it would hit this break statement. Break statements just indicate to the computer to exit out of a certain loop. So in this case, we're exiting out of the switch statement. This case C would continue to execute if there wasn't this break statement here. And the only place you don't need a break statement is in your default case. So yeah, this is essentially what a switch statement is. Switch statements can only use integers and strings. So right here we have a string, and that's what we're passing in. It could also use an integer or things that are convertible to integers, like floats or doubles, or any of the other numerical data types that we covered in the last variables video. Otherwise, the only other thing to note is that the value that you're checking must be the same data type as the case you're checking. So here we have a string and we're checking against strings. If it was an integer, these must be integers, so they must be matching data types. But yeah, that is essentially what switch statements are. They're not really used that much in practice. If statements have a lot more benefits, and we'll go into that actually right now. So here we are. These are if statements. And again, if this is overwhelming, let's dissect it. Let's see what it actually is doing, and it'll actually look a lot better than it seems. First, we created an integer called number grade, and we set it equal to 82. And what's cool about this, and why people prefer if statements, is that we can be more flexible with these things. So in the switch statement, you can't really do things that evaluate to a Boolean expression. And a Boolean expression is just something that's true or false, just like a Boolean variable. So for example, right here we have number grade greater than 90. So this is going to evaluate to true or false, whether number grade is bigger or less than 90. So we see that number grade is set to 82 here, so this is going to be false because 82 is not greater than 90. And that's a Boolean expression. So the computer will interpret this as false, and by that it will not go into what's inside of this if statement, or this part of the if statement, which is printing out the student received an A. Now we want to check another possible scenario. But in this scenario, we are checking two different criteria to see whether this evaluates to true or false. We are checking whether number grade is greater than 80, as well as whether number grade is less than 90. We do that by using this double and symbol. This double and symbol is used to check whether all criteria evaluate to true or not. So, for instance, we know that number grade is greater than 80, because 82 is greater than 80. And we know that number grade is less than 90, because 82 is less than 90. So this evaluates to true. This evaluates to true. And then we know true and true is true. So let's say, for instance, actually, let's look at the next one. We know that number grade is greater than 70, but number grade is not less than 82. Or less than 80. So we can see this evaluates to false, this evaluates to true, true and false is false, because not all the criteria is true. So in order for this to be true, every separate piece of criteria must be true. And in this case, it is. So in this case, since it evaluates to true, the student received the B, that would be printed out. This would not be printed out because true and false is false, therefore it would not go inside of this. And same for this next if statement here. Finally, we get to this else right here. Else just can be an indicator of the last possibility. So we checked for an A, we checked for a B, we checked for a C, we checked for a D. The only thing remaining is an F. So we can just assume anything that's not within the criteria that matches an A, B, C, or D is an F, because that's the only remaining group. So anything else, we would just print the student received an F, but the student did not receive an F. That's essentially what if statements look like and how they are utilized. One last note is that we could also use an OR operator instead of an AND operator. So I made a note of that here, but let's take a look at our third or our second else if, where we check whether number grade is greater than 70 and if number grade is less than 80. We noted that this evaluates to false because number grade being greater than 70 is true, but number grade being less than 80 is false, so true and false evaluates to false. But let's say we went ahead and make this an OR operator. So instead, we would check number grade greater than 70, true, number grade less than 80, false, and in OR, only one of them needs to be true. So if let's say we have 20 of these criterias, 19 of them evaluate to false, but one of them is true, then the whole statement is true. So here, instead of the entire thing evaluating to false, it would evaluate to true because number grade is greater than 70. So it would, print this out. It would meet this criteria. So you can see if statements are just this elaborate decision-making process that you do every day and might not even realize. Except now we have to explicitly tell something that doesn't have intellect what to do. But that essentially is if statements and switch statements in a nutshell. It's pretty easy when you think about it. Just think in a sort of abstract mindset and think harder about what you do every day. And now think about how you would tell something that doesn't have your consciousness, your intellect, how to do that. And that's what, you sort of break if statements into. And in the future, in the next episode, we'll get into for loops, while loops, and stuff like that. And you'll see different ways that you might think that we can, sort of take and tell a computer how to do. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed.